A courtroom in shock. Officer Brad Whitmore grabbed Judge Vanessa Hayes by the arm and dragged her out in handcuffs. A judge, humiliated in her own courtroom. But what happened next would leave everyone speechless and change everything. Judge Vanessa Hayes had spent her life fighting for justice. At 42, with a sharp mind and an unwavering sense of fairness, she had earned her place as one of the youngest black judges in the state. Her courtroom was sacred, a place where the truth was supposed to matter more than power, where fairness stood above fear. But on that Tuesday morning, everything shattered the moment Officer Brad Whitmore walked through the heavy oak doors. The courtroom was full, attorneys at their tables, the jury attentive, the gallery packed with spectators. Vanessa was presiding over a high-stakes assault case when Whitmore, tall and broad-shouldered with a hard-set jaw and cold blue eyes, stormed inside. His reputation preceded him, aggressive, confrontational, a cop who thrived on intimidation. The moment he stepped in, the room's atmosphere shifted, a chill cutting through the tension. "Judge Hayes," Whitmore barked, his voice like a slap across the room. "We need to clear the courtroom for a security check." Vanessa's eyes narrowed. "This is a court in session, Officer Whitmore. You have no authority here without a warrant." Her voice was steady, but her pulse quickened. Whitmore's eyes darkened, his lips curled into a thin smile. "You can't talk to me like that," he growled. Vanessa rose slowly from her seat, her black robe flowing behind her like a shadow. "You are out of line, Officer Whitmore. If you don't leave immediately, I'll—" Whitmore moved, fast. Before she could finish, his hand clamped down on her arm. Gasps erupted from the gallery. Vanessa's breath hitched as his fingers dug into her skin. "You're coming with me," Whitmore snarled, his grip tightening. Vanessa's eyes flashed with fury. She wrenched her arm free, her jaw tightening. "Release me at once!" Whitmore's hand shot out and shoved her back. The edge of the bench caught her hip, and she stumbled, catching herself against the podium. The courtroom was deathly silent. Even the bailiff froze. "You're under arrest for obstruction," Whitmore sneered, his hand going for his cuffs. "No!" someone shouted from the back, but Vanessa's focus remained locked on Whitmore. Her heart hammered. Her breathing was sharp and shallow. "You're making a grave mistake," she said through gritted teeth. Whitmore's smirk widened. He grabbed her wrist and yanked her forward, dragging her toward the door. Vanessa's eyes burned with rage. This wasn't about security. This wasn't even about her. This was about power, about control, about race, and Whitmore was making one fatal mistake, underestimating her. The handcuffs were biting into Vanessa's wrists, the cold metal cutting into her skin with every step Whitmore forced her to take. His grip on her arm was bruising, his fingers digging into her flesh like he wanted to mark her. The hallway was a blur of flashing lights and gasps. Journalists swarmed like vultures, cameras flashing in her face, the sound of shutters clicking cutting through the stunned silence. Her black robe was slipping off her shoulders, the symbol of her authority hanging loose and broken. A cruel metaphor for the way her dignity was being stripped away in real time. "This is outrageous!" a court official shouted from behind her. Vanessa lifted her chin. Even through the blinding flashes, she could see the faces gathering at the edge of the chaos. Black women holding their children's hands, their expressions twisted with fear and anger. Young black men with hardened stares, their eyes dark with the weight of knowing exactly how this story usually ends. The room was thick with the ugly familiarity of it all. Another black figure of authority being torn down in public, reduced to a criminal in the span of seconds. Whitmore's grip tightened as he shoved her forward. "You think being a judge makes you untouchable?" His voice was low and sharp, his breath hot against her ear. Vanessa stumbled, but her feet remained planted. She shot him a look sharp enough to cut glass. "You don't have the authority to arrest me!" Whitmore's mouth curled into a slow, vicious smile. I am the authority. Her blood ran cold. Vanessa's heart hammered in her chest, each pulse screaming at her to fight back. All those years, clawing her way through law school, breaking barriers in the courtroom, standing tall in the face of injustice. And now this, reduced to a criminal in cuffs by a man who thought his badge gave him unchecked power. Was this how it ended? Dragged from her own courtroom, humiliated in front of the very people she had sworn to protect? She was forced toward the open squad car door. Whitmore leaned down, his eyes glinting with cruel satisfaction. You're no different from the others, he sneered. You think that robe makes you special? You're still just... Vanessa's eyes flashed dangerously. Finish that sentence. Whitmore's smile faltered for a split second. A muscle in his jaw ticked. He slammed the car door shut, the metallic thud ringing through the air like a gunshot. Vanessa sat stiffly, her chest rising and falling as the car pulled away from the courthouse. The weight of it all pressed down on her. The humiliation, the betrayal of justice, the faces in the crowd etched with disappointment and rage. But beneath the pain, beneath the sting of the cuffs and the searing humiliation, something deeper stirred. Not fear, not defeat. Rage. It curled in her chest like a slow-burning flame. Whitmore had made one fatal mistake. He thought his badge made him powerful. He thought dragging her out in cuffs would make her weak. He was wrong. 3 hours later, Vanessa was released without charges. The courtroom was in chaos. The media was already swarming the courthouse. Vanessa stood on the steps, clutching the microphone as her legal team surrounded her. No comment, her attorney whispered. But Vanessa shook her head. No. This was bigger than her. She adjusted her robe and took a breath. The cameras flashed. I was unlawfully detained today by Officer Brad Whitmore, she said. Her voice was steady, but fire burned beneath it. He violated my rights, disregarded the authority of this court, and showed blatant disrespect for the rule of law. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Whitmore stood off to the side, arms crossed, a smug smirk playing on his lips. I have reviewed the statutes governing conduct within a courtroom, Vanessa continued, and Officer Whitmore violated multiple state and federal laws. The smirk vanished from Whitmore's face. And as a sitting judge, I have the authority to issue an immediate order of arrest for anyone found in contempt of this court. Whitmore's face paled. Vanessa turned toward the court bailiff. Arrest Officer Whitmore. Whitmore took a step back. You can't... Yes, I can. 2 deputies approached. Whitmore's face twisted in disbelief as the cuffs were placed on his wrists. This is bullshit, he shouted. Vanessa stepped forward until she was eye to eye with him. No one is above the law, Officer Whitmore. Not even you. As Whitmore was dragged away, the crowd erupted in cheers. Vanessa turned toward the cameras. The headlines exploded within hours. Black judge orders white cop's arrest after unlawful detainment. Justice served. Officer arrested after assaulting sitting judge. Vanessa sat in her office, the weight of the day pressing down on her. Judge Hayes? Her clerk asked. The governor's office is on the line. Vanessa smiled faintly. Let them wait. She glanced at the newspaper on her desk. The image of Whitmore being cuffed stared back at her. Her phone buzzed with messages of support from civil rights leaders, politicians, and people all over the country. A knock at the door. Judge Hayes? Vanessa turned. A young black woman stood in the doorway, clutching a legal pad. I just wanted to say thank you, the woman said, for standing up. Vanessa's throat tightened. What's your name? Amber. Vanessa smiled. Amber, would you like to sit in on today's session? Amber's eyes widened. Really? Vanessa nodded.
You should see what justice looks like." As Amber sat down in the courtroom, Vanessa took her place at the bench. Her gaze swept across the room, lingering on the empty seat where Whitmore had stood. Justice wasn't easy. It wasn't quick. But today it had been served. The gavel came down with a sharp crack. Order restored.